This tale is titled, My Parents and My Brother Got Me Expelled from University with a False Accusation, but now they want to reconnect because he had passed away. Hey everyone! Before we dive into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel isn't gaining the traction it used to, and subscribing is one of the best ways to support us. It's quick, free, and helps us keep creating great content. Your support means everything to us. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the video. So, this whole mess started about 7 years ago, but I really need to get this off my chest since recent events have brought it all back. Quick background. I'm a 26-year-old male now, but I was 19 when all of this happened. There's some seriously messed up family drama here, so buckle up. Growing up, it was always me and my younger brother. Our family seemed normal from the outside. Middle class, decent house in the suburbs, family dinners, all that typical stuff. But the dynamics were totally messed up. My brother was always, and I mean always, treated as the golden child, to the point where it became ridiculous. I don't want to come off as bragging, but I was a solid student. I had a 4.0 GPA, started a tutoring program for kids at the community center, was the captain of the debate team, and did all the right things you're supposed to do. Meanwhile, my brother barely managed a 3.4 GPA, spent most of his time organizing parties and playing video games, but somehow my parents saw him as a misunderstood genius who just learned in his own way, or whatever nonsense they'd say. Here's an example of how bad it was. When I got straight A's one semester in high school, my mom just nodded and said, "That's expected of you." The same week, my brother got a B- in English, and they took him to his favorite steakhouse to celebrate his improvement. I wish I was making this up. So anyway, fast forward to college applications. I applied to Stanford, my dream school since childhood. I had the grades, extracurriculars, and decent SAT scores, 1,540. I studied hard for months. My brother decided he wanted to apply there too, mostly because our dad went there and had this whole legacy thing going on. Here's where it all started to fall apart. I got my acceptance letter first. I'll never forget that day. I was in the kitchen eating leftover pizza when the email notification popped up on my phone. I was literally shaking when I read it. And I called my best friend right away because I knew my family wouldn't be that excited. Sure enough, when I told them at dinner, they just said, "Oh, that's nice," and immediately started talking about how they were sure my brother would get in too. Speaking of my brother's application, this still makes me angry. He barely studied for his SATs, got a 1,290, and his essay was some ridiculous story about how throwing house parties taught him leadership skills or something. I actually tried to help him study, stayed up late explaining math problems, helping with practice tests, but he would quit after 20 minutes saying stuff like, "Not everyone needs to be a try-hard nerd like you," and go back to playing Call of Duty. Then came the day his rejection letter arrived. You'd think someone had died. He came home from checking the mail and literally collapsed on the kitchen floor crying. He was 21, not 12. My parents rushed over like he was having a heart attack, while my Stanford acceptance letter was still stuck to the fridge under takeout menus and his old soccer team photo. The next few weeks were unbearable. My brother locked himself in his room most of the time, only coming out to sigh dramatically and shoot me dirty looks. My parents started acting weird too, making comments like how some people just get all the luck, or how life isn't fair. Like, I worked my ass off for years while he coasted by on charm and nonsense, but somehow I was the lucky one. The real kicker, my brother had been telling everyone, extended family, his friends, random people at the store, that Stanford was his destiny because of our dad. He even had a Stanford sticker on his car. So when he got rejected, instead of admitting that maybe he should have worked harder, he started spreading a story that I must have done something shady to get in. At first, he told people I probably cheated on my SATs or knew someone in admissions, but it got a lot worse. And looking back, I can see this was the beginning of his crazy plan to ruin my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but this rejection broke something in my brother. He couldn't accept that his destiny didn't work out, and instead of handling it like an adult, he decided that if he couldn't go to Stanford, neither could I. Fast forward to me at Stanford, and honestly, the first few months were amazing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could just be myself without my brother's shadow. I got lucky with my roommate too, Jake from Portland, who was also into computer science and didn't make me feel weird for actually enjoying studying. Our dorm room was in an older building. Nothing fancy, but it had big windows and was close to the dining hall. Jake and I set up our desks facing each other, having late night coding sessions fueled by Red Bull and cheap Walmart cookies. We had this system. The door was usually open because we had study groups, but we always closed it after 11 p.m. so we could sleep. Life was pretty good. I was maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Linear algebra messed up my 4.0, but whatever, and had joined the robotics club, working on an AI project that was getting some attention. There was even a Google recruiter checking out our department, and my professor hinted that I might be up for a summer internship. For once, everything seemed to be falling into place. Then the weird stuff started happening. It was subtle at first, like I'd be in the dining hall and people would look at me and whisper, or someone would switch tables when I sat down. I figured maybe I just had bad body odor, but then this guy from my calculus class, someone I'd never talked to before, approached me after class, asking if I could hook him up. I was like, hook you up with what? And he just gave me a weird look and walked away. About a week later, my RA, Sarah, pulled me aside after a hall meeting. She was trying to be casual, but asked if I was selling Adderall to other students. I literally laughed because I thought she was joking. I don't even take Tylenol for headaches, let alone deal drugs. That's when she showed me screenshots of someone DMing Stanford students on Instagram pretending to be me, offering to sell study drugs. The messages sounded like me, using phrases I'd say, but they weren't from me. There were even fake conversations where I supposedly admitted to stealing my brother's research project to get into Stanford. I knew right away it was my brother. He'd been stalking my social media, studying how I wrote, and creating these elaborate fake conversations. It got even worse. Jake and I would study at the 24-hour library together. But one night during midterms week, I had the worst migraine of my life. Seeing spots, nausea, the whole deal. Jake insisted I stay in bed, saying he'd share his notes with me later. The next morning, I dragged myself to my 8 a.m. class. When I got back to my dorm, campus police were waiting for me. Someone had anonymously reported that I was dealing drugs out of my dorm. They searched my room and found a shoebox full of weed and unlabeled pills under my bed, right where I kept my spare textbooks. Here's the thing. Only 3 people knew about that spot. Me, Jake, and my brother. He helped me move in and complained about how my dorm room was nicer than his at the community college he ended up at. I specifically showed him where I kept my extra books because he made a joke about hiding snacks there when our mom visited. I was freaking out trying to explain the drugs weren't mine, but then 3 students came forward saying they had bought Adderall from me. Later, I found out my brother had paid them with his entire savings from his Subway job. Imagine being so petty that you'd spend your whole summer earnings just to screw over your brother. The really messed up part? My parents were already planning to drive up to campus. They showed up just as I was trying to explain things to the officers. Instead of defending me or even asking questions like any normal parent would, my dad just stood there texting someone with this weird little smile on his face. Later, I found out he'd been texting my brother the entire time. Looking back, I can see how carefully orchestrated it all was. My brother knew exactly when I'd be vulnerable. During midterms, knew about the spot in my room, and spent months setting up this fake drug dealer story. He even timed it so my parents would be there to witness my humiliation. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with the dean, the disciplinary board, and campus police. Jake tried to defend me, telling them I was literally the straightest edge person he knew. My professors wrote letters about my character. It didn't matter. They had their evidence, and that was it. So here's where everything really went off the rails. The university investigation was a joke. They found the drugs in my room, which I'm 100% sure my brother planted, had these random students claiming I sold them Adderall, and there were screenshots of me messaging about drugs on Instagram. I did everything I could to prove my innocence. Offered to take a drug test, showed them my bank accounts, even had my high school teachers write letters about how straight-laced I was. But the disciplinary hearing was on a Tuesday morning. The same day I was supposed to present my AI project to a Google recruiter on Wednesday. I had been working on it for months, and the hearing was in this stuffy room in the admin building. It felt like I was on trial. I felt like I was on trial for murder or something. The board consisted of 6 people sitting at a long table, staring at me as if I were some dangerous criminal. My parents were there too, which somehow made it worse. My mom was doing this fake crying act. No actual tears, just these weird sniffling sounds, and my dad spent the entire time texting. Later, I found out from the phone bill that he was giving my brother live updates. Who does that to their own child? The worst part was when they brought in the witnesses. These 3 guys I barely knew from my dorm, who claimed I had been selling them Adderall since the first week of school. They made up this entire story about how I would meet them behind the library at specific times and had special bulk prices. It all sounded like a detailed fabrication, as if I were some professional drug dealer. Meanwhile, I was sitting there thinking about how I literally had to Google what Adderall was when my RA first accused me of it. Jake tried to defend me. He got up and told them how I was probably the most boring roommate ever. Wouldn't even drink energy drinks during all-nighters because I was paranoid about artificial sweeteners. He told them about our open-door policy and how anyone could have accessed our room. He even mentioned how my grades were perfect and how I was in line for that Google internship, so why would I risk everything to sell drugs? But none of it mattered. They had their evidence and their minds were made up. The dean, this guy with the most punchable face I've ever seen, read this long statement about how Stanford had a zero-tolerance policy for drug distribution and how they had to maintain the integrity of the institution or whatever. The expulsion letter was about 3 pages long, but I only remember the first line, "Effective immediately, your enrollment at Stanford University is terminated." Just like that, everything I'd worked for my entire life was gone. They gave me 48 hours to clear out my dorm room. Packing up my stuff was surreal. One minute, I was a promising computer science student with a potential Google internship, and the next, I was packing all my dreams into cardboard boxes while people whispered in the hallway. Some even took Snapchat videos of me carrying boxes to my car. Real classy. My parents showed up to help, but mostly just stood around, making everything worse. My mom kept saying stuff like, "I just don't know where we went wrong with you," and my dad was still texting my brother. At one point, he even smiled at his phone. Guess my brother sent something particularly funny about my life being ruined. The final punch to the gut came when the university wouldn't release my transcripts because of pending disciplinary actions. Not only was I kicked out, but I couldn't even transfer to another school. Oh, and they still expected me to pay for the full semester's tuition. Cool. Jake was the only real friend I had left. He helped me pack until 3 a.m. Afterward, we just sat on my stripped bed, eating vending machine chips and trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. His parents called and offered to let me crash at their place in Portland until I figured things out. They were super chill doctors who could tell something wasn't adding up, but the worst part was my grandparents. They'd co-signed my student loans, and my parents immediately called them about the expulsion. Instead of hearing my side, they just assumed I'd turned into some kind of drug kingpin. My grandmother even said, "I always worried all that computer stuff would lead you down a dark path." Like, what does coding have to do with drugs? By Thursday night, I was completely out of Stanford. Years of dreaming, studying, and doing everything right. All gone because my brother couldn't handle being rejected. The funny thing is, and by funny, I mean absolutely infuriating, he was doing fine at community college. He could have just accepted that's where he belonged and moved on, but nope. He had to make sure I lost my shot too. This part is hard to write about. After getting kicked out of Stanford, I basically had nothing. No college, no money, no place to live, and a family that thought I was Walter White Jr. or something. Thank God for Jake and his parents. They let me crash in their basement in Portland while I tried to figure my life out. Their basement wasn't anything fancy, just a semi-finished space with small windows near the ceiling and a couch that definitely came from someone's dorm room. But honestly, after everything that happened, it felt like a 5-star hotel. Jake's mom would leave breakfast outside my door every morning, usually just cereal and coffee, but it meant a lot. His dad helped me look for jobs online, but finding work was a nightmare. Try explaining to employers why you got kicked out of Stanford without sounding like a complete degenerate. I finally landed a job at Walmart, working 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shifts, stocking shelves for $11.50 an hour. Barely enough to buy gas for my beat-up 2008 Civic I bought off Craigslist for $2,000. All the money I had left from my summer job, but one job wasn't enough. I picked up afternoon shifts doing DoorDash deliveries and then worked 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. at this sketchy sports bar called The Penalty Box. The owner paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my background, which was nice, but the place was definitely a front for something illegal. I mean, why does a sports bar need 3 safes in the back office? My apartment was actually just a converted pantry in a rundown house I shared with 4 other guys. When I say pantry, I mean it literally used to store canned goods. It was so small, I had to choose between a twin mattress or a desk. Couldn't fit both. I went with the mattress and used my laptop sitting on the bed. One of my roommates, Miguel, was definitely a real drug dealer. Ironic, right? But he was actually one of the nicest guys. Sometimes he'd share his mom's homemade tamales with me when I was too broke for groceries. The worst part wasn't even the crappy jobs or the tiny room. It was feeling like my whole future was just gone. I'd scroll through LinkedIn and see my old Stanford classmates posting about their internships at Google and Facebook while I was trying to figure out if I could afford both ramen and toilet paper that week. Jake would call to check on me, but eventually I started dodging his calls because it hurt too much to hear about how great everything was going at school. My parents tried calling a few times too, but only to tell me what a disappointment I was and how my brother was thriving at community college. Like, wow, good for him for passing basic English while I'm living in a literal closet because of his lies. They even had the nerve to ask if I was clean yet. I blocked their numbers after that. The only thing that kept me sane was coding. Between shifts, I'd go to this 24-hour diner called Dots that had free Wi-Fi. I'd buy their cheapest coffee for $1.50 and just sit there for hours working on random programming projects. The overnight waitress, Linda, was this older lady who'd sometimes accidentally bring me extra fries or a slice of pie that was going to be thrown out anyway. She never said anything, but I think she could tell how broke I was. Dots became like my second home. It was quiet at night, nobody bothered me, and I could pretend I was still a real CS student instead of a college dropout working 3 dead-end jobs. I built this inventory management system for fun, just to keep my skills sharp. Looking back, that project ended up changing my life, but I'll get to that in the next part. Some nights were really dark, though, like sitting in your car, crying after a 12-hour shift dark. I remember one time I was doing DoorDash and delivered to a house that looked exactly like my parents' place. The dad who answered the door even looked kind of like my dad. I had a full breakdown in their driveway and probably scared the hell out of them. Rock bottom was probably around month 4 of this lifestyle. I got really sick with some kind of flu, but couldn't afford to miss work. I ended up passing out during my Walmart shift. The manager, Dave, actually drove me to urgent care himself. Shout out to Dave, you were a real one. The doctor said I had a 103-degree Fahrenheit fever and was severely dehydrated. I still went to my bar shift that night because I needed the money for rent. The crazy thing is, my brother was living his best life during all of this. I found out through mutual friends that my brother had been telling people I was away at rehab or dealing with personal issues. He even took over my old room at our parents' house and sold most of the stuff I had left behind, using the money to buy a PlayStation 5. All right, so remember that inventory management system I was building at Dots to keep myself from going crazy? Well, that turned out to be my ticket out of rock bottom. But let me backtrack a bit. One night, I'm sitting at my usual booth around 1 a.m., running on my 3rd cup of $1.50 coffee, when this guy in a suit walks in. Kind of odd for Dots at that hour, since the place was usually full of truckers and insomniacs like me. He sits at the counter and starts chatting with Linda, the waitress who kept accidentally giving me free food. I'm half listening while coding, and I hear him complaining about how his real estate office's software is terrible. They were losing listings, double booking viewings, just total chaos. Linda, who had seen me coding there for months, speaks up and says, "You should talk to my friend over there. He's some kind of computer genius." I wasn't a computer genius, though, just a Stanford dropout with insomnia and free Wi Fi. But this guy, Mark, comes over and asks what I'm working on. I show him the inventory system I built for fun, mostly to help Linda track the food Dots was throwing out. He gets really excited and asks if I could build something similar for real estate. Next thing I know, I'm picking up some freelance work from his company, maintaining their systems. At first, it was only $20 an hour, but that was almost double what Walmart paid, plus I could do it between my other jobs. Mark kept finding more things for me to work on, fixing their website, building a better system for tracking property listings, that kind of thing. About 6 months later, I'd automated half of their office processes, saving them tons of time and money. Mark then offered me a full-time position as their IT guy with a salary of $45,000, complete with health insurance and an actual desk in an actual office. No more pantry bedroom. Here's where it gets interesting. Being around real estate all day, I started picking up on how everything worked. I'd overhear the agents talking about deals, see how they handled clients, all that stuff. One day, an agent called in sick on the day she was supposed to show a house to a big shot client. Mark was panicking, so I offered to do it since I knew the property's details from the system I'd built. It was a total fake it till you make it moment. I watched 5 YouTube videos on showing houses on my way there, but somehow it worked. The clients actually liked that I could talk about the house's electrical system and point out potential upgrades. They ended up buying the place. The next day, Mark called me into his office, and I thought I was going to get fired for overstepping. Instead, he offered to sponsor me for my real estate license, saying my tech background gave me a unique angle with all the Silicon Valley types moving to Portland. Studying for the license was tough as I was still working full-time and taking classes at night, but compared to living in a pantry and working 3 jobs, it felt like a piece of cake. I got my license in 4 months and started as a junior agent. I made 2 sales my first month, and I thought I was on top of the world, but then something clicked. I realized I could combine my tech knowledge with real estate in ways no one else was doing. I built a website that tracked market trends and predicted which neighborhoods were about to boom, based on things like new tech company offices and coffee shop openings. I started focusing on helping tech workers relocate to Portland. By the end of my first year as a full agent, I made $882,000. Not bad, but nothing crazy. In year 2, I made $145,000. In year 3, I made $285,000. Turns out all those hours crying in my car while doing DoorDash taught me a thing or two about hustling. The real breakthrough came when I landed a huge account, helping a tech company relocate their entire engineering department from San Francisco to Portland. We're talking 50-plus houses, all high-end purchases. Commission on that deal alone was more than 4 years of my old salary combined. Now, I'm the youngest senior manager in the company's history, with $1.8 million in sales last quarter alone. I bought my own house in a nice neighborhood where my neighbors are all doctors and lawyers. I even got a German shepherd named Pseudo. Yes, I'm still a massive nerd. You should hear him bark when I say, "Pseudo, speak." The crazy part, I actually make more money now than I probably would have with a Stanford CS degree. Sometimes I check LinkedIn and see my old classmates stuck in coding jobs they hate, while I'm over here working 30-hour weeks and making bank. Oh, and remember Linda from Dots? I still go there for coffee sometimes, but now I leave $100 tips. I even helped pay for her daughter's wedding dress last year. She still tries to give me free pie, though. LOL. So here's where the story catches up to today. Honestly, I'm still processing everything. Last Sunday, I was out in my backyard, grilling steaks and playing fetch with Pseudo. Still the best dog ever, even if my girlfriend says teaching him to respond to Linux commands is peak nerd behavior. It was this perfect Portland afternoon, sunny but not too hot, music playing, just chilling with my dog. Then Pseudo starts going crazy, barking at the front of the house. He's usually pretty chill with delivery people and neighbors, so I knew something was up. I walk around to check, and there's this black Mercedes parked in my driveway. For a second, I think it's a client, since I get a lot of tech execs these days, but then the door is open. And yeah, it's my parents. Haven't seen them in 7 years. My mom looks like she aged about 20 years. And my dad has this weird attempt at a beard that makes him look like a bargain bin Walter White. They're just standing there, staring at me like they've seen a ghost. The first thing out of my mom's mouth, "Your house is bigger than we expected." Not, "Hello," not, "We missed you," not even, "Sorry for believing your brother's lies and ruining your life." Nope, just passive-aggressive commentary about my house. Classic mom. But then I really noticed their faces. They look broken. My mom's not wearing any makeup, which never happens, and my dad's hands are shaking. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. They tell me my brother wrapped his car around a tree leaving a club in Vegas 3 weeks ago. He died on impact. Apparently, he'd been working as a social media consultant out there, which probably means he was one of those club promoter guys who get paid to bring hot girls to parties. Honestly, it tracks with his personality. Here's the messed up part. They weren't just there to tell me about my brother, they came to apologize. Turns out my old roommate Jake, who's like a coding wizard at Google now, ran into my mom at a tech conference in Seattle last month. He didn't know my brother had died yet, but he basically told them everything, showing them all the evidence he'd saved from back then. Screenshots of my brother's fake Instagram accounts, records of the money he paid those students to lie, and even security camera footage from our dorm, showing a guy who looked suspiciously like my brother entering our room the day before the drugs were found. Jake had been collecting this stuff for years, hoping it would help clear my name. According to my parents, though I'm honestly still not sure I believe this, my brother had convinced them I was this evil genius who'd stolen his research project to get into Stanford. Remember how he barely passed high school science? Yeah, apparently he told them he'd been working on some revolutionary AI project in secret, and I'd somehow hacked his computer and stolen it. They claimed they had no idea about the drug setup and really thought I was dealing because my brother had shown them evidence. Probably those same fake screenshots he'd been sending around. Here is a rephrased version of the text you provided, maintaining the same meaning and structure while changing the wording and sentence flow. A mom from campus began crying, saying they'd spent years feeling like failures as parents because their son had become a drug dealer, only to learn that it was actually their other son who had been the real problem all along. As they were saying this, the dog was just sitting there, giving them the most disapproving look, almost as if he knew they were the ones who had wronged me. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to shout at them for not seeing the truth, like they raised me for 18 years. Did they really think their model student son, who never even touched a Red Bull, would suddenly turn into some sort of criminal mastermind? But another part of me just felt hollow. They went on about how proud they were of what I had achieved despite everything. Dad even tried to take credit, claiming that the struggles they put me through made me stronger. I literally laughed in his face, telling him that was like pushing someone off a cliff and then congratulating them for learning to fly on the way down. Then they started going on about how they'd lost one son and didn't want to lose another, how they wanted to be part of my life again, meet my girlfriend, maybe even become grandparents one day. Mom noticed a picture of me and my girlfriend on the wall and started crying, saying she looked like such a wonderful person. By the way, she's a pediatric surgeon, way out of my league. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I told them they needed to leave. They tried to argue, but the dog started growling. Seriously, the best dog ever. And they finally took the hint. As they were leaving, Mom looked back and said, "We didn't know about the drugs. We just believed him because he was our son too." And that's what's really messing with my mind. Maybe they were just victims of my brother's manipulation. But then I remember how they treated me my whole life, long before the Stanford thing. How nothing I did was ever good enough, how they always sided with him. I later found out they got my address from Jake, who ran into them at a conference, and they seemed so devastated about my brother that he felt bad for them. I can't blame him. Jake has good parents, and probably couldn't imagine parents who would actively try to ruin their kid's life. So, Reddit, should I forgive them? It's been about 2 weeks since my parents came to my door with the news about my brother, and honestly, things have become even more complicated. They showed up again yesterday, unannounced, while I was on a work call. Thank goodness for the Ring cameras. This time they brought a whole box of evidence. Old photos, my brother's journal entries, things they thought might somehow fix everything. Like showing me vacation pictures from 15 years ago could make up for the fact that they helped ruin my life. I didn't even go downstairs to let them in. I just watched them on the camera while the dog barked like crazy. Finally, I called the cops when they refused to leave. Watching my dad try to explain to two officers why they were just trying to reconnect with their son was both heartbreaking and ridiculous. One of the cops even asked if I wanted to press harassment charges, but I just wanted them gone. Here's the thing that's really messing with my head. After they left, I called Jake to yell at him for giving them my address, but he told me something that made me stop mid-rant. When he first ran into my parents at that tech conference, they genuinely had no idea I wasn't involved with drugs. They were still telling people I was lost to addiction or whatever. Jake said that when he showed them all the evidence about my brother's setup, they were crushed, like their entire world had collapsed. Apparently, my mom even threw up in a bathroom after seeing proof that my brother had paid students to lie about buying drugs from me. But here's my issue. Even if they didn't know about the drug scheme, though I'm still not entirely sure they didn't, there are still a few major problems. First, they never believed in me. Second, they always took my brother's side. Third, they didn't reach out to me for 7 years. Fourth, they only care now because their golden child is gone. My therapist, yeah, I'm seeing one now, says I need to separate forgiving them for believing the drug allegations and forgiving them for being terrible parents overall. She might be right. I've been reflecting on all the times they chose my brother over me, even before Stanford, when he destroyed my science fair project in 6th grade, and they told me I shouldn't have made him jealous. When they spent my college fund on his third attempt at starting a business that turned out to be a scam. When they skipped my high school graduation because my brother had a hangover. Every single time they celebrated his C-plus grades while ignoring my perfect ones. The more I think about it, the more I realize the Stanford incident wasn't the root of our problems. It was just the final straw in their long-standing favoritism. I called my grandparents yesterday, it had been years, and they apologized for believing the drug allegations. They said they should have known better, but they dropped another bomb. Apparently, my brother had been lying to the entire extended family for years, claiming I was sending him threatening messages and trying to ruin his life. He even showed them fake texts as proof. The guy was really good at manipulating everyone. My girlfriend thinks I should at least hear my parents out, saying everyone deserves a second chance. It's easy for her to say. Her parents paid for her med school and actually love her. Jake agrees with her. But Jake believes in humanity. He has good parents who couldn't imagine trying to sabotage their kid's life. But you know what really decided it for me? I found out they only started looking for me after they found my brother's journal, where he confessed everything he did to me, probably when he was drunk or feeling guilty. They didn't look for me because they missed me or figured out the truth themselves. They only came after me because their favorite child told them to. So I've made up my mind. I'm filing for a restraining order tomorrow. I already spoke with a lawyer about it. 7 years of no contact followed by multiple uninvited visits to my home should be enough for a temporary order. I know some people will think I'm being harsh, but here's the thing. I've spent years building a life without them. I've got a great career, an amazing girlfriend, the best dog ever, who just brought me his ball while I'm writing this, and solid friends. Why would I want to let toxic people back into my life just because they've realized they backed the wrong son? Yeah, maybe they didn't know about the drugs. Maybe my brother manipulated them too, but they were bad parents long before that, and finding out their golden boy was a liar doesn't automatically make them good parents. Final update. Well, this seems like a good place to wrap up this saga. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Writing this out has helped me process a lot of stuff. Special thanks to Linda at Dot's Diner for all the expired pies, Miguel and his amazing food truck, still the best tacos in Portland, Jake for being the best friend anyone could ask for, my girlfriend for dealing with my trauma, my therapist, who's about to make a year's worth of salary off my next session, and Pseudo, the best dog who knows bad parents when he smells them. Edit. Holy, this really blew up. For those asking, yes, I'm doing great now. I'm making more money than I ever would have with that Stanford degree, living my best life, and finally free of family drama. Stop messaging me for real estate advice. But if you're a tech worker moving to Portland, my DMs are open. Yes, sudo commands actually work. Current list includes sit, stay, kill, growl, fetch, and update. He rolls over too. I regret nothing. This rewritten version closely mirrors the original in both length and meaning, but the sentence structure and word choices have been altered to create a new version.